Benjamin.
Zach.
We haven't recorded anything in quite a while, actually.
It's been a while since we've done this. So I'm slightly nervous. I'm 90% sure that I've got all the tech stuff the way we always do it, but there's always that part of you that's like, back in the saddle, it's been a while.
Yeah. Muscle memory. Yeah. Well, maybe that's an appropriate segue, because we haven't done this in a while, and talking about being back in the saddle, because we're going to talk about something that was back in the saddle. I don't know. Is that a good segue?
No, it's a terrible segue.
Well.
But I do think we should start out by giving a little background about what we're doing.
Okay. Do you want to do that? Or
let's try. I'll start out. Let's try doing it together. Correct me if I get anything wrong.
Okay. I will.
You love correcting me. When did we first talk about? Okay, we're going to talk about Gremlins 2.
It's been a few years.
It's been a few years that this has been in the docket as something that we were going to do, because you really like Gremlins 2, and I said I haven't seen Gremlins 2 since I saw it in the theater in 1990 as a big fan of Gremlins 1, the original Gremlins movie. And when I saw it in 1990, I found it offensive. Mm-hmm. And the reason was I hated it. I hated it because I felt that they made a joke out of a movie that I held dear. I loved Gremlins so much that I had a latex stripe mask that I would wear to school to play Gremlins at recess. Because and that's the other thing about Gremlins. The original movie is to me was like this perfect, like, funny fantasy horror movie, like, and the jokes were, it's I don't know, I loved it in a special way. And what I latched on to was the Gremlins themselves, which sticks out to me. Like I didn't want to be Billy fighting the Gremlins. I wanted to be one of these, like, unhinged creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched
chewing on cables,
right? Yeah, and just making chaos and
eating all the Christmas cookies.
Yeah. And then Gremlins 2 came along, and I remember not liking it. And then we started talking about it, and you loved it quite a lot. And I thought, okay, it's been 30 years. So, like, last year was like the 30-year anniversary of Gremlins 2, right?
I think so. Yeah.
So we said, like, why don't we rewatch it? Because I had this feeling that I would react to it very differently this time. Mm-hmm. And so we finally, we were not able to do it in person, but we watched Gremlins 2 on the same night at the same time, saying ready, set, play. Mm-hmm. And
so before you say and, okay. So I just want to add that I too loved the original Gremlins. Too young to have seen it in the theater. I'm a couple years younger than you, but that's enough when you're talking, the difference between like 3 and 5. Yeah. But I loved the original Gremlins, and then when Gremlins 2 came out, which I think was like 5 years later, if I'm not mistaken. So, it's not like Gremlins came out and then Gremlins 2 came out a year later.
Right.
I did see that one in the theater, and when I originally saw it, I wouldn't say that I hated it, but I definitely could tell that it was different.
Yeah.
And I definitely was like, well, like, it was fun, but it was also really silly, like breaking the fourth wall and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Then as I got a little older, I watched it on, cable or whatever. And I remember my friends and I watching it and being like, this movie is bonkers and it's so good. And so I remember my line forever was that Gremlins 1 and Gremlins 2, in my mind, were equally good, but for different reasons. And I think that your view at the time was probably a dominant view. I feel like only fairly recently have people been coming around to Gremlins 2.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to figure out, like, now that you're mentioning the age thing, I was only going to be like 7 when Gremlins came out. So I wonder, I'm struggling to think of myself as seeing it in the theater. Mm-hmm. I remember, when did Dark Crystal come out?
Oh gosh, I want to say like 83, something like that.
Okay, because Gremlins is 1984, and my 16-year-old cousin took me to see The Dark Crystal in the theater, and that seared itself. That's another movie that seared itself into my memories. But we had to leave. I was afraid of it.
Yeah.
And I
looks like Dark Crystal came out in 1982.
Okay, that makes more sense.
But I think that it's also important to remember, as you and I are people of a certain age now, movies used to be in theaters for a lot longer than they are.
That's
now.
true. That's also true.
In even movies that were not blockbusters. I mean, like, you know, all the Star Wars movies were in the theaters for like years, you know?
That's hard for me to remember. That's hard for me to keep in mind because it's changed so much.
Right. But I mean, I definitely remember seeing a movie in like February and then seeing it again in the summer.
Yeah.
I absolutely have those memories. So, you know, it can be tougher as to like, well, it may have come out in 82, but if it was still playing in theaters, even like second run theaters by the time it was, you know, 84, something like that, right. You know, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we agreed to watch this movie and take notes. And I remember after the movie ended, you texted me.
Yeah.
And you said something like, boy, oh boy, do we have to talk.
Right.
And I said, that sounds ominous. And you said something like, save it for the podcast.
Right.
So I want to talk about this movie, but I guess I don't want to be in suspense anymore.
You don't want to be in suspense anymore.
What'd you think?
I want to preface this by saying I may have undercut myself by right before I started the movie, I went in to clean the kitchen and I brought my speaker in and I played some of the original Gremlins soundtrack for myself, which got me in a really Gremlins-y mood. And I guess here's the thing. I feel like my response to this movie is the worst possible response it could have been for a podcast.
Okay.
Because I didn't come away being like, I loved it. It is the best movie in the world. I had it. And then I didn't be like, but I definitely did not react negatively to it like I would have. It took a while for me to warm up to it. And I think the movie itself takes a while to warm up to itself. And it's definitely got it's not a perfect movie, even for what it is. But all that having been said, once it got itself going, then I was in, and there were some gags, and there was some. By the back half was pretty much a blast. And
so I'm curious, at what point would you say for you the movie was chugging?
When Christopher Lee came on.
Okay, all right.
There was a lot of stuff where like where Billy's what's her name? His fiance.
Kate.
Kate, that's right. Billy and Kate are kind of running around, and there's just a lot of like work that they're doing to explain the setup, which goes on for too long. Okay. I think. And there's a lot of gizmo stuff that there's a lot of gizmo stuff that doesn't set a clear path, right? Like we should have had I love the clamp building logo.
I have a lot to say about Clamp, but
But I loved him, and I love the building logo, and it's just like it just takes us a while to get there, and maybe we need that time to get there. But like, there's some stuff with getting Gizmo from the shop to the building and having him walk directly out into the daylight, where I'm like, forget you guys. This is stupid. If you're gonna make the 3 rules and then have Gizmo just like walking around the streets of New York in daytime, then like I think that's I almost want to say that's like when I was out from the original movie, right? When there's like, oh, we don't even care. Gizmo's just this cute thing. He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah. I'll admit that scene is a little odd. I think you could argue, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily making this argument, but I think you could argue that, you know, we see Gizmo in light all the time.
Yeah.
That it's really just like bright, direct light.
Yeah.
That harms them. And so, you know, he's in an alley. He's, you know, kind of amongst the trash. I think maybe if they really wanted to sell that more, they could have maybe had him look a little pained or something like that. But I mean, it's nitpicky because I hear what you're saying, and I agree. There's sort of like a lot of setup
Yeah.
to get to where the movie just breaks open.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about this movie is there are so many characters in this movie, and I feel like I love every single one of them.
Okay.
Every single like ancillary background character. Like, okay, you have Billy and Kate. They're fine, but they're obviously like the straights, right? They're
Although they did like they made the best possible choice with Kate, I think, is just making her like slightly unhinged, like subtly unhinged, right? Like from the first movie, she's very much like she dusts off Billy's jacket. She's looking after him, right? And now it's like she's still sort of in that role of looking after Billy, but she's also like, it's like the Gremlins thing has changed her. And it's,
I think
that worked out
for sure. I mean, she is not happy when he's like, Gizmo is back.
Yeah.
You know, she's not like, oh, our cute little friend is back. Not at all.
Right.
But like, I just think, I mean, part of it is the casting, but also just like, they pack so many characters in there, and I feel like you're rooting for all of them.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
Obviously, like a great, like an absolute great casting choice. Having this, you know, Christopher Lee, this horror actor with this voice, and he's playing Dr. Catheter,
Right.
and he's performing all these experiments. But even just down to like his lab assistants,
those
twins there,
yes,
talking about the cloning, you know, and yeah,
that was a beautiful
the secretary
bit of weirdness.
who is sneezing all the time, you know, and like, oh, what does he say when she has the package, right? And I don't remember. It's a disease.
Yeah, because he's always wanting to get his diseases.
Right. And he says something like, I think it was like the package was like rabies or something, right? And he's like, I already have rabies.
Yeah.
I was hoping for malaria.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's
packed with those
silly
kinds of jokes. And like the one that sold me, you'll know which one it is. But it's rife with... Once it really gets moving and it's still throwing visual gags into the background, that's when it's really good. And so there's that moment when they're walking in the one floor with all the TV studios, the cooking show. Good grief! But I think they're walking toward the cooking show, and they pass Studio C, the archery channel, and this guy in a Robin Hood costume just walks out, breaks an arrow over his knee in disgust, and then just keeps on walking. It's this like 1 second gag as you're walking by Studio C, the archery channel.
Now, see, what's funny is I don't know how many times I've seen this movie, and I don't recall that.
Yeah.
But that's like
but
how
that means it's
full
rich
this
with
movie
that
is.
kind of thing. And like I can embrace that now. And once the movie got its steam going, and I did embrace that, it was definitely a joy.
You know, something that I as I was watching this with more of an analytical eye, something that I picked up on that I hadn't really picked up on before, and I kind of wonder if this contributed a little bit to your original feeling about the movie. Gizmo is essentially taken out of the movie for the bulk of it.
Yeah.
So like he's there in the beginning, he gets wet, the gremlins pop out, right? But then after the gremlins change, like they capture him, and they're basically spending the entire movie torturing him.
Yeah.
Until he has his big like resurgence in the like last quarter of the movie.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're really seeing the people dealing with the gremlins. And I'm not necessarily like complaining about that, but I'm saying that I can see where, you know, if somebody wants more Gizmo.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of incommunicado for a lot of it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think too, there are parts of this movie that I do find scary.
Okay.
Such as like the shot where I don't remember which gremlin it is, but he's holding Gizmo, and then he has this huge electrical cable.
Oh.
And it's just like, I remember looking at that and being like, wow, geez, like,
yeah,
you know, I mean, this huge, like 3-inch diameter, you know, coaxial cable that's sparking.
That's right.
Stuff like that. I always find the scenes where Gizmo gets wet to be a little disturbing, including in this movie.
And this movie with the the water thing, they made a little Gremlins change where when they bubble on their backs, you can see the little fetal gremlins in there.
Yeah.
And that was not in the first movie, and that was kind of horrifying and cool. So that I appreciated.
Yeah. So when Gizmo gets wet from the plumber there who's fixing the water fountain, do you know who that was? Who that maintenance guy was?
He's in. What was he from?
That's John Astin, who was the original Gomez in the Addams Family.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Also father of Sean Astin.
Yeah. Okay.
Samwise Gamgee. Yeah. So that's the other thing is like everyone in this movie is somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you don't know. So like there's like when they're at the yogurt
right.
Yeah, there's like 2 football players there, and they're only seen as they get pulled down into like the yogurt toppings.
Right. Okay. Huh.
But yeah, it's full. All right. So here's a question. Here's my question. Here's another question. Did you have a favorite gremlin? Because one thing that I did like about this movie is I did like the gremlins having different personalities.
Mm-hmm.
In the original, the gremlins are all completely interchangeable with the exception of Stripe.
Right. Yeah.
I liked in this one that there were different gremlins with different personalities, or different mogwai with different personalities. Did you have a favorite?
I'm trying to think.
And I'm talking like the original core, so not like the brainy gremlin or, you know.
I did like that googly-eyed gremlin and big lip, like cigar smoking gremlin ended up hanging out together a lot. Like they were weird friends. So that worked for me. Which gremlins were in the? I guess that would be my answer. I didn't like Brainy Gremlin is like it. That's fine. It's fine. I don't know. I don't know if I had one I really reacted.
But the Brainy Gremlin has really good lines too.
Yeah,
like
he does.
I love his line about how sunlight presents a problem for their ethnic group.
Yes.
And you know, we don't tan, we don't burn.
And he's like, we do have a problem with atavism.
Yeah.
He's like very self-aware about.
But he's talking about how like, oh, and what's the other line he says too? Oh, when he's being interviewed and they're like, well, what do you want? And he's like, well, we want what everybody wants. We want culture. We want, we want to see Broadway shows. So we'll have to figure out how to get tickets to that. I know there's a lot of street crime, but I believe we can watch that for free. Like
that's right.
There's a lot of that like 1980s, 1990s New York humor in there.
Yeah.
Kind of before the like Disneyfication of Times Square. Yeah. A lot of that is still in there.
That's cool.
Well, okay. We're talking about that interview. I want to talk about Grandpa Fred because I love Grandpa Fred.
Wait, what's Grandpa Fred? Wait, what?
Grandpa Fred, the guy that is hosting the horror show.
Grief, there is so much in this movie.
Yeah.
Like that was a whole other part of it.
Yep.
Wow.
I mean, the fact that he had a backstory
and
right?
an
He
arc.
had an arc.
He did have an arc. He became he got his own. He became a news anchor.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, it's so great.
And even like in a lot of ways, I think it's a good movie to show like how you can say a lot by doing a little. Even just stuff like it's a throwaway sequence when Billy comes down to talk to Grandpa Fred and he's like, oh, hey, like I made this bat effect for you. I thought maybe you could use it.
Yeah.
Because we see like, okay, they have a relationship. We remember that Billy in the first one, like he's into all those horror movies and comic books and things like that.
That's right.
And, it's just sort of like a nice little sweet moment between the two of them. And it's all of like 5 seconds. And I also love, again, it's a small thing, but like, at the end, when Grandpa Fred gets promoted to news anchor, the cameraman, right? He's like, well, what about my cameraman? It's like everyone in this movie is a good person.
Yeah.
He didn't just like, oh yeah, thanks, I'll take the credit card. I'm done. It's like, what about my cameraman?
Yeah.
Now, we could talk about that maybe the cameraman is a little bit of a relic
yes.
of a previous era, the stereotype of the Japanese tourist with all the cameras.
Right. But this is surely not the sole instance of that. I mean, that was like a early 90s thing, it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you cringe when you see it every time, but it was also ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
Golly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, so we had like Grandpa Fred, Dr. Catheter, the plumber.
What about I want to talk about the cooking show at some point.
Oh, Microwave with Marge.
Yeah.
Who's obviously supposed to be this like drunken Julia Child.
Yes. She was
Rip
great.
off.
What was her ending though? Did she remind me how she ended? Do you remember?
Well, she gets out of there because then at the very end, there is a shot of her talking to the Futtermans.
Right.
And she's like, oh yeah, you take the processed cheese sauce and you put it on top. Yeah. And she's like, oh, Murray, your favorite. So yeah, so she gets out okay.
Here was a major problem with the movie. Here's something I still can't come to grips with. I don't like that the Futtermans were in it.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
I don't mind it. I mean,
because I thought Mr. Futterman meets his doom in the original one.
Right. And I think they kind of try to retcon that where it's like, you know, they're kind of talking about how like, you know, he's better now, right? Yeah. Like he's healed up. And I think certainly, you know, there's the whole thing about like how he has to relax, he has to calm down, you know, and he's like, see, I'm not crazy. I guess I don't feel strongly about it.
And that's the thing. I felt not just not strongly, but I felt that they were kind of in the way. Like they were a relic from the first movie to give us like another bridge from movie to movie that just kind of slowed things down too much.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And playing like the New York tourist bit. But go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one little quick thing that I did like was when Mr. Futterman is taking on the Bat Gremlin. Mm-hmm. I noticed this. He's wrestling with the Bat Gremlin and everybody else is just walking by. Like they're not even looking. And again, I feel like that's such a subtle visual joke about New York City. That he's fighting with this bat thing like this covered in cement creature, and everybody's just walking by. Cement
and people are like, da, 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 da. Yeah, that's true. And also the Futtermans, like, because I want to talk about at the end, there's this, like, they kind of pull together the team. And Mr. Futterman does end up being, like, part of the team at the end, he kind of makes a little bit of sense, right? Because he gives it that team diversity that you need. So what's the character or element that I hated the first time watching that I love now?
Am I supposed to guess?
Yeah. It's just a character, I'll say. It's a character that...
Is it?
Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to guess, is it Clamp?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, go ahead.
It's Marla.
Oh, okay.
Like the first time around, like because Marla is such a caricature or a cartoon character, like with like the chain smoking,
the accent, the cigarettes,
ridiculous accent, the nonstop smoking. Like there was nothing for first watch Ben to like hang on to except being annoyed at that first viewing. And now I'm like, oh, I am totally in.
Yeah.
Marla is like the best.
Well, because like I think like we've met people like that.
Yes, and I just love how like the moment Billy gets a compliment from the boss, she's like all over him.
Zoop! She just she's like, now we're right in and is like,
and she has no like, there's no thought that he wouldn't be interested, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's like she wouldn't be able to seduce him, and then she does such a poor job of it too.
Right.
That I just love her, and then at the like. I wish she had been given more of a win at the end. I mean, like, she totally wins because the boss, because Clamp is like, oh, you're great. But I just wish she had been able to, like, defeat some gremlins or something as part of the team.
Yeah. I mean, I do kind of like the joke where Billy's delegating responsibilities to everyone in the team. And then he's like, Marla, smoke.
Yeah. So Marla was a complete turnaround for me. I loved. There were so many weird, weird conceits that really, like, it really is like to look at those two movies. It really is. You really see the shift between the mid '80s and the start of the '90s. Like now they even say like this is a smart building, right? And I wouldn't have even thought that.
Yeah, so that's something I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about that a little bit too.
Okay.
I was particularly struck watching this, all of the like smart technology and the smart building and stuff, and how like in 1990 or 89 or whatever, when this was written and filmed, that was a joke. I mean, that was like, how ridiculous is this, right? Like having to talk to the elevator and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And realizing how much of that has become a reality and how kind of disappointing that is.
Yeah.
But that brings me to the other character that I really want to talk about, which is Clamp.
Yeah.
Daniel Clamp. So I think it's pretty clear that Daniel Clamp is Donald Trump, right?
Okay. So I'm going to
of
admit that until you just started talking about Clamp, like I finally was like, oh, you're like, I got it before you said it, but I didn't get it while I was watching the movie. And I am ashamed of myself.
Well, right. So Daniel Clamp is obviously a send-up of Donald Trump, but
Right.
again, a send-up of 1980s Donald Trump.
Right.
You know, it's very difficult to sort of
To suss out
see him in that
past
light
Trump.
anymore.
Yeah, right.
But part of what I love about Clamp is, sure, he is a filthy rich New York developer and he cares about money and all this kind of stuff. But there's an innocence to him.
Yes.
There's a childlike innocence to him where even though he is so many things that a lot of us have come to vilify,
the way that guy plays that character, he plays that character with an intact sense of wonder.
Yes. And he wants to help people, right?
Yes.
Like if he's unsure about something, but then he's told, hey, if you do this, you'll be a hero. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll be a hero. And he legitimately, like at the end, when the SWAT team, I mean, he's up at the front with them.
Yeah.
Now he's kind of like, it's kind of like he's playing soldier.
Right.
But he's still,
because he doesn't have a good sense of reality, but he does have a sense of wonder. Like he's a very specific idea of a character. Like they took a caricature and they gave it something different.
Well, he becomes sympathetic.
Yeah.
You like him. It would have been very easy to write him as the villain who then gets his comeuppance at the end.
Here's the 80s businessman.
Right.
All agreed.
You know, it would have been very easy to write him as like the Mrs. Deagle.
Yeah. And see, that's a problem is like, I'm like on first viewing way back when, that's what I missed, I think, was the Mrs. Deagle. Like, okay, here's somebody who's just like, like just petty and horrid. And then they get in their little chair and get rocketed out of the house. It's so mean. And this movie isn't mean like Gremlins is.
Right.
Which I should love. And I do. And now that I'm able to see them as two different movies, I do.
So something like that I think kind of encapsulates the Clamp character is when he sees Billy's drawing of Kingston Falls.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, this is what people want. They don't want, smart technology.
His whole idea just turns on a dime, too. He's
right. But the line is, it's something like, we are going to build the biggest...
right.
What is it? It's like the biggest, grandest, quiet town that anyone has ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, and he even says at the movie, he's like, it's not about technology, it's about people. So it's like, he kind of has almost like a semi-catharsis. But like I said, he never seems cruel in any of his actions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? He never seems like he seems like a futurist with, again, this kind of sense of wonder and childlike,
but just no handle on people.
Right, because he's somebody who obviously for a long time has been able to snap his fingers, and he has, a high-rise apartment office with 1 million cable channels, and he gets excited that he gets to use his escape tunnel.
Right. Oh, the escape tunnel with the tree that comes out, and he's in a little tube. And it comes out in a potted tree on the sidewalk outside. That was such a great.
But he says like, "Oh, I get to use my escape tube."
But then the escape tube does not disappoint you because it's so stupid and it comes up so slowly out of the ground. And also, again, nobody bats an eyelash at this, which is also really cool. And then, like, the smart building itself could have been just a big wet blanket of a plot thing, right? But there are moments when it really shines. Again, like, so my other favorite one of those background gags, like the guy with the arrow, was when they pull the fire alarms and the voice in the background says something like, "Yes, enact that age-old drama of self-preservation."
I have it written down. I wrote that down. I wrote that down exactly.
Oh my gosh, what is it?
The age-old drama of self-preservation.
Yes. And it's saying in that like Epcot Center voice.
Yeah.
Yes, that age-old drama of self-preservation. Like somebody designed a smart building and thought this was what a good recording would be.
But like there's so many things too, like the bit about when Clamp's head of security there, whose name I can't remember, he comes in and he sees that like Billy has these personal items on his desk and he reprimands him for it. He's like, this is a Fortune 500 company, not a flea market.
Yeah.
And and again, he has that drawing of his hometown, and I can't remember the line. He walks over to this like minimalist abstract painting, and he's like, "We provide artwork from some of the world's top artists."
Yeah.
And I just feel like so much of that has come to pass. There was also another line that I liked where they were showing Casablanca.
Yeah.
Now in full color and with a happier ending.
I didn't notice that gag.
It's it was just in the background.
Wow.
It was like, and tonight, Casablanca, now in full color and with a happier ending.
That's great. Oh my gosh, that's great. Yeah, that Robert Picardo's character was pretty good.
I would say he's kind of the closest thing the movie has to a villain.
Right. And he gets to end up with the Lady Gremlin.
And, the look of acceptance on his face at the end, where it's like,
and that's the closing image, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, crazy. What a crazy movie.
Which is good because it's like, it's funny because
that's us at the end. He is the audience at the end. That's what that is.
Right.
It's just this gremlin like coming for you, and it's the weirdest gremlin of that you can imagine, and you're just like, yeah, okay.
And I love thinking about how they actually had to build the mechanism for her to have the little puckering kissy lips.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, the puppetry in stop motion. It was all puppetry in stop motion.
Yeah, and that's something I wrote down too, is I feel like this movie in 1990, this was just as practical effects, I think, were starting to end.
Yeah.
Because soon things were moving over to computer.
Yeah.
And it makes me, kind of sad when I think about how had this movie come out after, say, 1999, all the Gremlins would have been CG and they would not have looked as good.
Yeah.
These Gremlins look fantastic.
They do.
And something that, what little I know about puppetry and effects, just gives me that much more appreciation to like the brainy Gremlin, how well his lips articulate.
That was good.
Like, it's not just, it's not like Kermit lip flaps. Yeah. It's fantastic.
They're better than the original Gremlins, but that
sure
gives me a hit of nostalgia though, because something I liked about the first Gremlins is the fact that they were, they're working with a budget. They're cruder, and they use dim lighting to kind of soften those edges of the Gremlins not quite working well. And I'm aware that is just pure nostalgia on my part, but I really do like that.
Mm-hmm. But even like I'm thinking about like the close-up shots on Gizmo and the close-up shots on googly-eyed Gremlin with all that articulation in the mouth and the eyes.
Yeah. And it's like they didn't have to do that. It's like somebody made a decision to make a bunch of weird, different Gremlins that each present their own fabrication challenges. Mm-hmm. And that somewhere along the way, everyone's like, it does feel like people enjoyed making this.
I think that's one of the things that I really like is you can tell in this movie, I feel like this is a movie where everyone was having a blast.
Yeah.
There's two sort of, well, there's three. But there's two kind of fourth wall breakings that I really like that I want to talk about.
Okay, because we have not talked about Hulk Hogan at all yet.
Right, yeah. We haven't even talked about that scene, and that's not even what I'm talking about.
But we've gotten this far into this. We're like 40 minutes in, and we haven't mentioned like
the Hulkster.
That scene, which comes out of nowhere and is pretty insane.
Well, okay. So before we talk about that scene, I want to talk about these two minor scenes. One is the fourth wall with the movie Police with Leonard Maltin. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that?
No, remind me.
He's the movie reviewer,
Yeah.
Leonard Maltin,
Yeah.
and he's got a show called Movie Police, and he's talking about how the first Gremlins is being released on VHS,
Yes.
and he's like, why? Who would ever want to
Right.
watch this movie again? You know, and he's doing all this thing, and then of course all the Gremlins kind of come up and dispose of him.
But that's right as it's segueing into fourth wall breaking, right? Isn't that right
Yes.
before Hulk Hogan? I think it is, because I think all that stuff stacks.
Okay.
I think that stuff all stacks, and you're like, wait a minute, and then you're like, wait a minute, and then the Gremlins like put on a different movie, which looks like, what is it?
So the other one, which I don't know is necessarily fourth wall breaking,
Okay.
but I really took this as talking to the audience.
Okay.
So it's the scene where Billy is in the control room and he's explaining the Gremlins, and he's explaining water and bright light and eating after midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And then the techs, the executives in the control room start kind of grilling him, and they start having that, wait, hold on. Okay. What if he eats something and he's got, a caraway seed stuck in his teeth, but then it comes out and he swallows it? You know, he didn't eat that after midnight. Or, what if he flies in a time zone? So in other words, they start asking all of these questions that people have been asking about the movie.
Which is exactly what would have bothered me so much at like 13 or whatever, right? I would have been like, you're acting in poor taste. This is not in the spirit of the movie to ask this question.
This is where the scene, I think, is going to save it.
Uh-huh.
They're talking about this and they're laughing at him, and then what happens? A gremlin bursts out of the control panel and starts chewing on the guy's face.
Yes.
It's a reminder of like, don't think about it. It's a movie. Just have fun.
Just enjoy this ride. And you're right. And now I can appreciate that. And now I feel like you're right. That's exactly what the movie is doing. It's just like, relax, or this gremlin's going to eat your face off. Oh, man.
So should we talk about the big fourth wall breaking, which I think is probably one of the most memorable? I think it's probably the one scene that everybody remembers from this movie.
Right. But we're going to have to, it's been a few days since I watched it. The Gremlins, but I feel like the movie reviewing scene kind of segues right into that.
I think
so. And then the Gremlins, steal the projector.
So you see the film like burn and stretch. Yeah. And you hear Gremlin, and it's just like a white screen, and you hear Gremlin voices, and then they start doing shadow puppets.
Yes, the shadow puppets, and they get more and more absurd.
Right. There's like a bunny, and then there's Abraham Lincoln.
Yes. And they start doing the 7 years ago, and then they put on,
but in Gremlin
like
voice.
A black and white, like weird beachy film, or it looks like like old pornography,
like some volleyball film from the 50s.
Yeah.
So then we cut to the lobby and we see the projectionist come out, and he's all like beat up, and a mother drags her kid out of the theater.
Yeah, yes.
And starts complaining about the movie. And the guy who's the usher, who I don't know off the top of my head who he is, but he is definitely
a cameo. Okay.
Stuff, and he always plays that kind of movie.
Yeah.
And he's that kind of character. He's like, I'll handle this.
And then he goes and he taps somebody on the shoulder, and he turns around, and it's Hulk Hogan. And he rips his shirt off, and he starts talking to the Gremlins.
People pay good money for cold drinks and hot popcorn to see this movie. Do you think the Grimsters are any match for the Hulkster? And then he looks right in the camera and says, sorry, folks. Won't happen again.
And then they put the movie back on.
And then they put the movie back on. Now, here's some interesting trivia for you.
Okay.
In the VHS version of Gremlins 2, they do the same thing, except rather than it being film that burns and melts, it's the Gremlins messing around with the VCR.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
Which is really cool, because they are technically at that moment being Gremlins.
Right.
They are being what Gremlins are, which is creatures in the machine. Flaws in the machine, like sentient flaws in machine.
So I have something too that I prepared just for this moment.
Okay.
Let's see if you can tell me what this is. I swear to God, I will never hurt anything again. They are all part of the great chain of being. There are things that man was not meant to splice. What the hell is he talking about? Demanded Forster. Try and calm down, said Billy. Where were the... There. The novelizer, Mr. David Biscoff Esquire, has been successfully waylaid and is now tied up in the bathroom of his Los Angeles apartment. Do not attempt to adjust your book. We have control of the programming. Please excuse the rudeness. You have previously known me as the gremlin that drank the brain fluid, or, as Biscoff quaintly called me, Mr. Glasses. Believe it or not, in the screenplay, I am referred to as Brain Gremlin. I want to take this opportunity to talk to you about our philosophy towards life, so that we will not be misunderstood and branded as monsters. Anyways.
Wow. So in the novelized version of this, they actually
the same thing happens.
The same thing happens, except they take over the book.
Yes.
That's incredibly cool.
And again, talking about people having a good
and
time,
people enjoying what they're doing, and taking the time to think about it.
Right. Because if this was just a cash grab, if this was just, let's just put something out, they wouldn't care about that stuff.
Right.
So I own the novelization of Gremlins 2, and I love that is it.
That is pretty cool. Wow. Mm-hmm. And we do need to circle back to what Gremlins are and where they came from, because it is a segue to something we've been talking about doing.
Sure. Well, so yes. Well, so I think in closing, I had another quote that I wrote down. Okay. This was like at the beginning of the movie though, but it was Clamp's line where he was trying to build a big thing in Chinatown.
Right.
And the tagline is "Where business gets oriented."
Right. Yes, I noticed that one too. There are so many gags in this.
Yeah. But again, it's that like late 80s, early 90s, blowhard executive. Like, this is a fantastic tagline, having no clue how insensitive it is.
Oh my gosh. And okay, so one more little moment that I wanted to say, that I just want to say that I really appreciated was the Mounties at the restaurant.
Yes.
Then, like,
the chocolate mousse.
Yeah, the chocolate mousse. But just the fact that they're in this New York restaurant and there's like people dressed as Mounties. She's like, we're going to go to this Canadian restaurant. It's great. And then they go and there's like guys dressed as the waiters are dressed as Mounties in the background. And Marla
I don't know if you noticed, but like his mug that he's drinking out of is like a hollowed out log.
I didn't notice that. But that's the attention to detail that I'm really appreciating in this movie. And then the fact that like Marla has a glass of wine and Billy has a Jolt Cola.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even remembered that Jolt Cola had existed until I watched this. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's a Jolt. It's
like the first Monster Energy drink.
There's a Jolt Cola on the table.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, okay, so I'll just say one last thing.
Okay. We have so many last things.
Of a little bit, again, a little joke that I love. So when Dr. Catheter is talking about the Gremlins are starting to go crazy. They're causing mayhem. And there's a scene where he delivers this line so effectively that you don't even really hear what he's saying. But after seeing it multiple times, he literally just turns and the camera zooms in and he goes, "Things, stuff." And that's it. He says things and stuff. But again, he just delivers it in such a Christopher Lee way that you think he's saying something really powerful and you just blow right by it.
Yeah.
But then you're like, wait, all he said was things and stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And it doesn't even matter, like, if that was a product of him just turning, like they said, just turn to the camera and say something, or if he was just going with it, or what. Mm-hmm. His presence in the movie did an awful lot, because he just had that. It's presence. He lended sheer presence to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. Good stuff.
And apparently has camels and stuff up there for some reason.
Things not meant to be spliced.
Did you notice like the cow? Did you notice the cow with the
Oh, that's right. They're leading animals around in there.
And there's a cow with like a helmet with all these wires, and you just hear in the background it's like, "I am a cow. Yes. I like to give milk."
Yes. So this movie is so packed. If you want to see a movie that is stuffed to the gills, anybody listening, I recommend Gremlins 2.
Yes.
For sheer density of stuff and things.
Of things and stuff. All right, so if we want to segue into what we're talking about, so I actually have a quick little something.
Okay.
I have another thing that I prepared. So this is quick. This is from a book called Mythological Creatures, a Pictorial Dictionary by Paulita Sedgwick. And this is a book that I've had since I was very young. Okay. Gremlins are the brownies of airplanes. They are mischievous little creatures who scramble into the engine and drink the gasoline and send out fiery sparks to scare the pilot. Luckily, they do not get along with carrier pigeons and will not get aboard if the pilot takes one with him.
Wow. I did not know the thing about carrier pigeons.
I didn't either, but I guess it makes sense.
Okay.
So we know that gremlins, the idea of a gremlin came about
very recently. Yeah. That's what I like about them specifically, is that they're such a recent addition to the canon of folkloric creatures.
Yeah. And their whole, their whole reason for being is to mess with technology. Yeah. So you have World War II pilots, something goes wrong. Well, it must have been a gremlin.
Yeah.
So that's like, so I mean, that's the origin of it. And we could go into it, even more. I haven't done any.
What year was the William Shatner Twilight Zone episode with a gremlin?
Oh,
because if they're only as old as the 40s, and that episode's black and white, so it's what, the 50s?
50s or 60s. Okay. I mean,
so the concept alone would only be 20 some years old,
right?
Which is kind of neat.
Do you want to explain what that scene?
There's a Twilight episode where William Shatner is a passenger on an airplane. I haven't seen this in forever. Young William Shatner, and he keeps seeing out the window this creature on the wing, and he keeps trying.
1963.
63. Okay. Yeah.
And the episode is called Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. And they also remade it for the Twilight Zone movie.
And in my memory, he says it's a gremlin. Mm-hmm. He says there's a gremlin on the wing. And then I think he keeps looking out. And at one point, it's like tearing things apart out there, and keeps looking at him. And then I think like now, correct me if I'm wrong, they take him away because they just say he's crazy. So they strap him up or something like this. And then the plane goes down. Is that right?
It's been so long, I don't remember.
It's got if it's Twilight Zone, it's got to have that kind of ending where it's like nobody listened and the plane goes down. Well,
and if I remember too, I think the whole premise is that he was somebody who was recovering from a nervous breakdown to begin with.
Okay.
And he happened to be on this plane, and then he starts raving about how there's someone on the wing.
Yeah.
There's someone on the wing. I believe in the movie version, I mean, didn't research this.
Sure.
But if memory serves, in the movie version from the 80s, it's actually John Lithgow.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Playing the William Shatner.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so I mean, Gremlins are a pretty recent addition, like you said, a recent addition to the folkloric canon, and are linked to the rise of machines and technology.
Yeah. Which tells you that these creatures keep popping up no matter what changes we make to our way of life, which is kind of cool.
So do we want to talk about why this is a segue?
Well, I was thinking this is, we've been talking about doing a set series run of podcasts examining a bestiary of mythical beasts, I guess, right? Like an examination of certain types of mythical beasts, each divided up into episodes. And we had also been talking about, watching Gremlins. And so I thought this would, I don't know, it'd make a good segue episode, an episode 00 for our series, which we've been planning out for kind of a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, this is, this is making me want to do, maybe we have to talk about, maybe we'll do an episode about gremlins as folklore.
Yeah.
Or gremlin type creatures, maybe like we said, creatures who are sort of more recent in human consciousness.
More recent, but where that the same concept keeps popping up is there's a lot to talk about. I mean, I feel like we could definitely fill an episode with that stuff. But
I want to look up this carrier pigeon connection.
Yeah, because that's something I'd never heard of before. But we both have this deep love of folkloric creatures, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. And if you want to join us for that, I'm very excited about our first episode.
Yeah, and we've already been. I don't think we should reveal what the first episode is, but we have discussed it. But also the other element is each creature that we talk about in these episodes, either Ben or I will be illustrating.
Yeah.
So we'll have some drawings and stuff to go along with each of these creatures.
Yeah, it's a fun experiment.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun. Well, Ben, obviously, I am glad that you rewatched Gremlins 2. I think it's okay that you weren't blown away and you didn't like suddenly decide that you were going to get rid of every movie that you owned except for Gremlins 2.
Well, it didn't make me hate
fine.
Gremlins 1. Like, I think you were hoping that I would be like, I don't even care about Gremlins 1 anymore. Now
I love Gremlins.
I know. I'm just kidding. No, I think, and the more, and it was a joy. We've been talking about this for so long, and I'm so glad we finally were able to kind of go through it. And even in talking about it, it was nice for me to remember like how much there was and how much I really did. Like, it's a funny movie.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a movie that satirizes itself, but it does it so well.
Yeah. And also we gave me an appreciation for how much love there was in there.
Well, and I think it's important to remember that it's the original, the people who made Gremlins 1 made Gremlins 2.
Yeah, and when you told me that way back when, I think that kind of got me into this mode of wanting to watch it because you said, "Oh, it's the same people," and I had thought that, "Oh, Gremlins made a lot of money. They pulled another crew in and made this big joke of it." Young Ben thinks that, right? And now I'm like, no, these people are having a great time, and they also, who wants to make the same movie, right?
Well, and I had read that I believe it was Joe Dante had said that they had a blast making the movie, but that he felt like the only reason they got away with so much of the stuff that they did was because the studio asked them to do Gremlins 2.
Okay.
And so it was sort of like...
They weren't pitching something,
Right. Really quick, final thought. Okay. Do you have a final thought on Kate's story about Lincoln's birthday?
No, I don't. That's one of the gags that I remember very, very clearly from the first watch years ago. But I feel like it's still just kind of attacked. Is there something specific in there?
No, just, I mean, that it's satirizing the first movie where she's talking about Christmas.
Yeah, and that's where I fit. Like the first time I was like, oh, they're making a joke of the first movie, and this time I'm thinking like, oh, they're really giving Kate a personality, and it's a little unhinged.
Because I do like that, like she, like as she's telling the story, Billy kind of puts his arm around her. It's kind of like, okay, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, because in the first one, that's played so seriously, and this time she's just like, she just does it with every holiday. It's so weird.
Oh, don't talk about Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, and then Abraham Lincoln was one of the shadow puppets. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, we're right on an hour, so this is perfect.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm glad that you enjoyed the movie. And I feel like now we can quote this and share it with each other and share it with others as well.
Yeah. And I can always walk out of Studio C and break an arrow and be like, never again.
That's all I want. All right,
my friend.
For Ben Hatke, I'm Zack Gialongo.
And for Zack Gialongo, I am Ben Hatke.
Join us next time, whenever that is. Bye.
Hey everyone, David Universe here, producer and audio engineer for Ben and Zack's Monster Market. On behalf of the team, thanks for listening. Music for this episode was created by Twinstrumental. If you'd like to see sketches of the creatures discussed on this episode, as well as other mystical goodness, please visit us at monstermarketpod.com, as well as Instagram and Facebook at monstermarketpod. For creature recommendations, or just to say hello, please email us at monstermarketpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, beware, because they be monsters out there.